Welcome to this edition of Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Today, Dr. Maureen Frank talks with the crew at Welder Wildlife a little bit about mist nets and the maps monitoring avian productivity and survivorship stations that they have at the Welder Wildlife Foundation. Check it out.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cup Chat. My name is Dr. Maureen Frank. Emily Grant had something come up this morning, so it's just me. She trusted me to run the show this morning, and joining us today from the Welder Wildlife Refuge are Dr. Selma Glasscock and Angie Arredondo. And so they are very special guests today who are going to talk about mist netting, which is a subject that we brought up a couple weeks ago on Cup Chat, and then realized we had never talked about it on Cup Chat. So maybe our viewers might want to know a little bit more about what that is. But first, can y'all tell us just a little bit about what the Welder Wildlife Refuge is? What y'all do there? Angie, it looks beautiful behind you. I think we should come visit.
Angie, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, it's a wonderful place. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We specialize in outreach and conservation education. We also have a Welder Fellowship program that funds university students throughout both their master's and PhD programs in the natural resource field. We do teacher trainings, university classes, K through 12 programs, all sorts of fun stuff. And we were created in 1954 by Mr. Rob Welder. And he set this land aside in his will, 7,800 acres, because he was a little worried that his grandchildren weren't going to get to see wildlife and the landscape as he viewed it in his younger days. So he made a will and set this land aside. And so it's been established since 1954, and we've done a lot since then. So I have been here for a little over, Cardinal just landed outside my window, sorry. I started here about 2 years ago now, I believe, as the education program coordinator. And before that, I was their conservation educator in 2014, I believe, through 15. I went back to school and I came back as their program coordinator. And it's been a lot of fun since. I get to sit and watch birds all day. This is a great place to go birding, and unfortunately it's private though, so there's a few lucky people who have gotten to go birding here, but you can see behind me, this is our front gate, and yeah, it's wonderful. But I'll let Dr. Glasscock tell you a little bit about her and anything else she wants to add.
Well, so I've been with the foundation for 26 or 27 years now, and I too came to the foundation as educator, and so through the years things have changed quite a bit. If it were 20, 30 years ago, we wouldn't be doing this right now. So most of our programs are all field-based, although Angie and our conservation intern Sarah go out to schools when we're not during the COVID, obviously, but we do a lot of that, and we provide, now Angie and Sarah have been working really hard to provide some of our programming online. So the foundation itself, I guess our crowning glory is that we have funded probably around 360 to 370 master's or PhD students through the years. And our research, much of it occurs here on the foundation, but a lot of it occurs elsewhere across the country, and has in the past. We've kind of pulled in the reins in the last few years. So that, and if you can visit our website and learn more.
Yeah, it's a very prestigious thing to have a Welder Fellowship. That's definitely something in the wildlife profession. When you know that somebody was a Welder graduate student, that's definitely a high mark for them. All right, so let's talk about mist nets a little bit. So we mentioned mist netting a couple of weeks ago, and we mentioned it in kind of correlation with talking about bird research. But what are mist nets? What does this mean? How do you use them for bird research? Give us the basics.
Well, Angie, you want me to, or you want to? You have one?
I do have one. I can answer it if you want to give an intro real quick and while I'm taking it out of the bag.
Well, I'll just start off with, first of all, think about the hairnet that your grandmother used to wear to keep her hair in place. They are not that fine, but it's sort of the same concept where the nets are somewhat invisible to birds, and they our nets are you can buy nets in different lengths. Ours are about 12 meters long, and you can buy them with different mesh sizes. And we wanted to target small birds. You can't even see
I
it.
say it's so fine you can't even see it, but I do have a photo I can pull up real quick.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So we're targeting birds in the chaparral habitat, or we have for about the past 17 or 18 years now. And so we're setting up nets there, and you can see how they're you can barely see them. So technically what happens is there's 4 panels. You've got there you go, great. There's 4 panels that are spread across, and they're held to 2 poles by trammels on the top and bottom. They kind of billow like that in the wind, and that's intentional. You don't want them really tight. And the birds will fly into those, and initially they fly directly into them, and they more or less their heads go through the holes. If they're a large bird, and Angie has a video later, we'll show you, if a large bird hits it, they may just bounce off. But for small birds, their head goes through the net, and the wings may become somewhat entrapped. And so, thank you, they look like this when they get caught. And so our job then, we run the nets about every 20 to 30 minutes. During the summer, we have 11 nets. Angie had a picture of the station up there. But every 20 to 30 minutes, we have a team that runs the nets. They don't stay, we don't leave the birds in there any longer. And then we pull them out, and they're bagged where they're safe. And we return to our main station where we process them.
So there is a time limit that you make sure that you're checking these every so often. But that bird looks awfully tangly. So is this safe for birds? I'm sure some of our viewers will want to know.
That's a good question. Angie, you want to take that one back to the bird?
Sure.
So it does look pretty entangled. If I'd walked up to that, I'd have thought, oh goodness, it's a small bird. Small birds sometimes are easier and sometimes are harder to get out. There's been some research on the safety of misnetting, and there's a publication out. I wrote it down, and I don't think I have it right in front of me right now, but out of like 380,000 records that they reviewed from banding stations all over the US, and I think in Canada as well, that what they found was that injuries, I'm just going to, it's a percentage, but I'm just going to throw it out there. So number of birds per 1,000. Injuries, about 2 to 3 injuries per 1,000 birds. And then mortalities are very low like that as well. And maybe it was injuries was 5 and mortalities was around 2. But that information is out there, and that research is there. Many people ask that question, so I started doing some research to find out. We're very, very cautious with all of this. Temperature is a big factor. If the temperature reaches 90 degrees, we're in South Texas, so it's generally just heat that's a problem for us because we ban during the summer, during the breeding season. So if the temperature begins to reach 90 degrees, it's red alert for us, and we begin getting the birds out of the net and closing the nets as soon as it reaches that. And sometimes that's at 9:30 or 10 in the morning. So we get a short period of time in which we can run the nets in late summer. So cold is a problem as well, but not here.
Yeah, definitely not.
And
if it got cold enough there, you'd be worried.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Angie, you want to add anything?
No, I think you hit all the marks. I will, it is a learning skill to try and take these birds out of the net, and it can be overwhelming at first. But every year that we prepare for maps, we have a training that we go through and learn how to take the nets take the birds out of the nets properly, and make sure we're doing it correctly so that we don't injure the birds, their air sacs or anything like that as well. So we take it pretty, we have to, because there are permit based, and Dr. Glasscock, if, we make any serious mistakes, she could lose her permit. So we have to, really do things efficiently. And again, our number one priority is the bird. So our taking the bird out of the net is something that happens really quickly with training. If we can, under a minute, we try and shoot for 30 seconds. It's, again, harder with some of the smaller birds, but again, safety is our number one priority. So it's rare that we have any sort of mishaps or anything like that.
Yeah, and there is a stepwise procedure that we follow. We evaluate the bird as soon as we hit the net, which side it came in on, what trammel it's in, is it like double bagged or things like that we have to kind of work it off from a weird direction. And that skill comes with practice. Angie's very good at it. And but it doesn't happen. I mean, the first year people with us are generally helping us run the net and alerting us to birds being in the net and just learning the whole process.
Yeah, the first time that I actually got to take birds out of a net, they were American robins. And so thankfully those are a little bit bigger and sturdier, and that was kind of a good thing. And my advisor did that on purpose because they're a little bit easier to learn on, as opposed to something like, it looks like you've got a hummingbird in the picture there. I have yet to free a hummingbird from the net, and that kind of terrifies me because I would not want to do that by myself. I would want to know that I had somebody like Angie there with me, because it's just tricky when they get smaller and they're more delicate. So.
And that's how I feel when Selma's around. I'm like, oh, good, Selma's here. If I need help, I get on the walking, Selma, I need help.
Well, there are times when, we get birds that get pretty bound up, and I'll look at it for a while, and then I'll have Angie, if she's around, look on the backside, make sure we're doing. So even though we're pretty experienced and I feel comfortable running them by myself, the last resort, which banders don't like to do, is to cut the net. And if it looks like the bird is under a lot of stress and it's hot, and even if my banders are under a lot of stress and they're heating up, because that's a serious concern for us, then we just clip the net and repair it later and get the bird out as soon as possible.
Yeah. And so, okay, so you mentioned that you take them out of the net and then you put them in a bag. So why do they go in a bag? What do you do with them once you have hands on them? And I think this just kind of talks about why in general we need to catch the birds as opposed to just looking at them.
I think Angie has some pictures of that.
Oh man, I didn't put a bird bag, but I do have a bird bag here.
Okay.
These are bird bags.
Oh, it disappeared. There you go. So bird bag is just a little bag, cotton bag, lightweight cotton, that each bird gets its own bag, never two birds in a bag. When you put the birds in the bag, they calm down and they don't injure themselves. Us holding the bird increases the body temperature of the bird. They're absorbing heat from us. So we put them in the bags, and then each net has a number. We have a clip, so we know the exact location, GPS location of that bird when it was collected. And then we run all the nets at the same time, come back, and then we may have 10 bags hanging in a tree waiting to be processed. If we have, say 4 or 5 people that are helping process, that usually goes pretty quickly. Most birds that we have, for example, the common birds, northern cardinals, those are our beginner birds. There you go. There's the birds hanging in a tree. They will sit there in the shade quietly, and they're not stressed unless they're injured. So we know if we have an injured bird, we process it first, evaluate it, and then we have what we call a bird hospital. If we think the bird can't be released, it needs to rest, or it's overheated, we put it in the bird hospital, which for us is a cooling area. In the northern states, it would be a warmer area. So it's just a small box with some ice packs and covers in it for them to sit on. So So we process those birds as quickly as possible, as Angie said, and then the data we take on it are wing and tail measurements. We take the mass of the bird. We look at the feather tracks on the bird. First thing we do is band it. Actually, Angie should have reminded me. We band the bird because even if we don't get all the measurements, we've got the band number. We write that down and the species. And then if they happen to escape, which they do sometimes, we have that number in that band, in that species. So then we look at age. So Angie's got two birds here. They're both white-eyed vireos. The one on your left is a juvenile, and the one on the right is an adult. And you can see the color on it, but the big thing there for us when we see it is that dark eye on the juvenile and then the white eye on the adult. And so those are kind of each species has different characteristics. We also look at their wings to identify what age it is if we don't see these distinct differences. In this case, we're looking at primary feathers on two different species, the northern cardinal on the right, and then I forget what species these were on which one it was on the left now. But you can see in the secondaries and the primaries, the white outer edges on the bird on the left vary and over time during the year, and those feathers wear down just from weather and temperature and flying through the thing. And so that gives us an idea of what age the bird is and tells us what time of the year it might be in that species as well. And then the primary feathers and the secondaries, all birds molt their feathers pretty much completely every year. There are some that will retain tail feathers for a couple of years, but we'll look at those feathers that Angie's showing there to determine maybe whether it's a juvenile feather or whether it's an after a second year or older bird by looking at the feathers. And then we also look at the feather wear. Angie, add some stuff to that.
Well, Selma mentioned, wear and tear through flying through the brush or, things of that nature. So you can see here, these are pretty worn out feathers. But the other big thing we have to consider in wear and tear is the sun is kind of their biggest enemy. Just constantly being in the sun will really wear down feathers. So as they're molting, they'll put on these really nice new feathers, and then each feather has a specific job. So these primary feathers are nice and stiff. Those are their main flight feathers. And when the wing is tucked under, all of these feathers that are here tuck over those primary rachis, which is these lines right here. And that helps protect the primary feathers. So again, it's just depending on wear and tear, the contrast that you might see between different birds. So we'll also look at the primary coverts and the secondary coverts and the contrast there, whether there's a lighter brown here or a deeper red in the primary coverts and so on and so forth. And then we also look at whether a bird is molting or not. So you'll see some shorter feathers maybe here in the primaries and things of that nature. But it's definitely a thing we work at. We use our pile guide, which again is, let me bring it up here. This is our kind of go-to book that we use that pretty much tells us everything we need to look for to age and sex a bird when possible. It becomes difficult during different seasons and things of that nature. But and then, of course, if your birds are sexually dimorphic or not sexually dimorphic, then that's another thing we have to consider. But this is what we use most often. And you can see they give you tips of when you should start seeing these ages. And this is all just a terminology that you have to learn, which is also part of the training we undergo. But all of this will help us determine how to read these feathers and what to look for in these feathers to determine the age.
So can you talk a little bit too about, you're doing this, and we've mentioned that it's a station and you're doing this every year. What is a MAPS station, and what is the purpose of bothering learning all the ages and sexes of these birds?
Well, MAPS stands for Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survival. And it is a program that's run through the Institute for Bird Populations. And these are run basically by biologists, or in some cases, volunteers that have the proper permitting across the United States, into Canada, and down into South America as well. And they have a different program in South America because the seasons are different, but it's called MOSI, and this is called MAPS. But that all of the data that we collect each year is then sent to IBP, and they use that. If you look at their website, there are I don't know how many publications that they have produced from data that are accumulated by scientists, or in some cases they're banders, but usually they have some experience, because you have to have banding permits from the U.S. Geological Survey to be able to band, and that's heavily regulated. And then you have to have state permits to do research in many states. In Texas, we have to have state permits to be able to capture the birds. And then I have a federal permit that if something happens to a bird, we can retain the bird for our collections here at the foundation. So it's heavily regulated in that sense. And they have a strict protocol that we have to follow in order for that data to be standardized across all of those stations and to be valuable to them. Otherwise, if it wasn't, then they really wouldn't be able to use the data.
So kind of like we talked about, I think last week was 2 weeks ago, we talked about Christmas bird count and how there's like a procedure that everybody does across the whole, well, not just the country, across really the whole like Western Hemisphere. And then that allows us to compare those data. So MAPS is similar in that everybody's doing the same thing all across the continent. And that way you can use those data to understand how populations are doing.
Our map season may vary a little because it begins we still have a little bit of migration, but we're getting birds that won't get up north for maybe a couple of weeks, depending on which species they are. So their season will start later than ours. The earliest season in the United States is down in the valley. So the first week starts, the first MAPS date starts a week before ours at the Welder, or 10 days before it. And so it runs in increments like that across the United States. So, yeah.
And so it sounds like there's permits needed, and it's very structured. And so you can't just go buy a mist net and decide that you want to trap birds. You
actually have to have the permit to buy the net. So if you don't have a permit, right, they won't let you.
Right. So given that, if I'm somebody who loves birds and thinks this sounds super awesome and I want help, what's a way that somebody can get involved and help with bird research that might be in their area? Or if somebody lives in South Texas, can they come help you guys?
Yeah, well, first of all, depending on where they live, they need to go to the IBP website. And there's a map there of all of the stations throughout the US, and see if there's a station close by them. I don't remember if it shows who's running that station on the map. I don't think it does, but they can contact IBP and they can put them in touch with whoever is running the station to see if they need assistance. For us, we do have volunteers. In order to be able, like Angie mentioned earlier, in order to be able to work with us through the season, we do a training for them. And essentially the first year, they're not going to get to handle birds as much. We usually have a couple of species that we let them handle so that they can learn the technique. Everybody's really slow. We were slow when we began in identifying and aging these birds. It's not easy. And so you check with those individuals. And for us, if it were an occasion after the COVID's over, we didn't operate our station this year because when you're working together, I may be looking over Angie's shoulder, or she may be looking over mine, or we're working with somebody right next to us that is not as experienced. So we just didn't feel like it was safe this year. But you can contact us through the website, or Angie is got in the conservation education program. If they're going to be in the area, they could come and visit a day. What time do we leave to go out?
5:30.
We leave at 5:30. And so generally we're done, I'd say by 10 or 10:30, but by the time we wrap up and everything, it's usually 11 when we get done in the morning and back at the headquarters. So they should plan to either be here early or just whatever, make those arrangements through us. But that's an opportunity, like I said, elsewhere. You mentioned Christmas bird count. I think you run one of those, and that's a great opportunity. And those would be my recommendations for people that don't have a lot of experience. They begin to learn to ID those birds by sight. The backyard bird count is another one that they could be involved with. That would be a good way to get started. And then the breeding bird survey. There's a lot of those spread through the country, and some of them aren't being operated. So anyone that is actually fairly good at identifying those birds in the field, they need that data so they can go and see if there's some vacant ones or go on a bird count with somebody else. So those are the experiences I think the general population could have outside of, visiting a map station.
Yeah, because it's super fun to get to hold birds, but it's definitely something that, because we're worried about the health and safety of the birds, it's a little bit limited, but there's equally important research being done in other ways that you can do just without a permit. And, we've got Christmas bird count coming up, like you mentioned, and that's a fantastic way for people to start getting into just bird research in general. So, yeah. Cool. Well, thank you guys both so much. Emily would be mad at me if I didn't ask y'all a fun question at the end, now that we've talked a lot about the science of mist netting. Let's see, it is almost Christmas bird count time. It's almost Christmas time. Because y'all are located farther south and on the coast, what are some birds that show up this time of year in the winter that you're excited to see? Like, what's your favorite species that only shows up there in the winter?
You go, Angie.
Well, I will say, we see these birds, they have been counted on our Christmas bird count, but I have never seen one. And I think it was last week sometime I saw my first American woodcock. He was out in the front lawn and doing his little dance and everything. So that was really cool. But just in terms of maybe some species that we see every winter, I think the eastern phoebes are just cool little birds. I like the way they dip and dive around. Vermilion flycatchers and things like that too are always really exciting to see. But the woodcock was pretty dang cool. So I was really excited about that.
We did a couple of short videos yesterday. I know we're kind of out of time here, but Angie, we caught a cool bird for sure. But I don't know if they have time to watch it, and if not, then we'll put it on our website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is it on your guys' Facebook, or it's on you just have
Not
it on
yet.
your website?
We're finishing up editing, so we could probably put it on sometime today or tomorrow. Just a quick clip of the green jay that we caught. Sorry, did I ruin the surprise? Sorry.
That's perfect. If you want to share it on here, and I can always put links up. You can either put it on here, or I can link to the website, but I'll link to your website regardless. And then I'll also put that IBP one up that Selma was talking about. So
sure.
It's kind of cool to think about, we have eastern phoebes and vermilion flycatchers. We're just a little bit north of y'all, but they're going to, for the most part, migrate for the winter. We have some that breed here, at least at my house. There's some that breed in the backyard. It's kind of neat that some of them don't go that far. They're just down the road with you guys. But yeah. I've never seen an American woodcock. That's super cool. And I feel like, I know some people have like a lifer pie or a lifer dance or something. I feel like maybe your lifer dance should look like a woodcock dance, especially if you see dance along with it. So
That's a good idea. Yeah, I pretty much lost my mind when I saw it. Our office manager saw it first, and she said, "There's a bird out here." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm coming." And I went outside, and I was just like, "Oh my goodness!" And I ran back inside and grabbed my stuff, and so that was really cool. Felt like I was meeting a legend or something because of how delightful. But
Yeah. I saw my first one on Christmas bird count here way back in the 90s. And so, everybody was questioning me about it, whether
Yeah.
it was that or a snipe. And I did the same probably with Angie. Are you sure it was a snipe?
yeah,
But when she showed me the dance, I was like, woodcock. So we get excited about birds like that. And then, I mean, we've got, some of the beautiful birds here, green jays and things like that. I won't say they're commonplace. We still get excited, but not like seeing birds like woodcocks that we don't get to see all year round. So very often.
yeah, I may have to find a video that I can link to of their dance. Or if not, everybody go search for a video of an American woodcock dancing. That's pretty good.
I have a clip of them dancing.
Oh, do you?
Let me try sharing, see if it'll play for you.
Okay. We always have time for dancing woodcocks. That's awesome.
No, it was crazy.
Okay, can y'all see that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let me fast forward so you can see them in clear view.
So this is the one you saw. You took this video.
Yep, he was right outside the breezeway. I'm sorry. There he is. He's dancing.
There you go. I love it.
I do too. Yeah, he stood there for a while just dancing. Let me get to. He did it a little more when he was in the grass. There he goes.
Yeah, I remember that's good.
There it is.
Yeah.
So you've seen the Facebook video of the Billie Jean bird dancing? That's him. It's a woodcock that's doing that.
That's funny.
And off he goes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so that was fun. I missed it, but I got to see the video. So
pretty cool.
I guess one more question for y'all. Are you guys doing a Christmas bird count this year?
Yes, we are. And I think, I don't remember, 18th, I think.
I think
December
so.
18th, I think, is the date on it. And yeah, so we'll, we've got just a select number of people this year, again, because of COVID. And we're kind of asking everybody to separate. And so these are a lot of the standard people that generally come, and we're putting them in locations where they know where they are. And then we're not usually have a large lunch together and, some fun things, but I guess this year we're going to avoid that because we don't want anyone to get sick.
Yeah, so if you're in the Sinton area, go check out the Christmas bird count if you want a chance to help with that on the Welder. Ours is also the 18th here in Uvalde. We are also doing ours. I think we'll have pretty small groups, but it seems like we've got kind of enough to cover. And like you said, we've got some people that have been doing this for years and years, longer than I've been here for sure. And so we've got good help to kind of spread out and make sure we cover all the areas. So cool.
Do y'all visit different areas around town or out on properties? I mean, so you've got it all just mapped out.
Yeah, we're all on public stuff. There's not any private properties, but our center is where Highway 90 and Highway 83 cross in Uvalde. So it's a lot of like going around town, but then we have some phenomenal parks too. So we don't just split ourselves into quadrants. We have quadrants, and then we have a whole section for Cook Slough because it's such a hot spot. And so it gets its own group of people that go there and check it out because there's usually a lot of birds there. So yeah, we're lucky to have some really nice public areas that are included within our zone. So that should be good. So
well, maybe next year if they're on different days, Angie will come up and help you out.
I
Yeah,
love
we-
those suggestions, Selma. I love when you suggest things that way.
Yeah, we might have to coordinate. It's hard because, there's everybody across the country is constrained within certain dates.
Yes.
And so there's some, it's always hard to choose. There's a lot of people that try to do as many Christmas bird counts as they can. And there's always going to be some that are conflicting dates. So I'll put out another plug too for anybody who's kind of in the south, but central Texas region, not on the coast. I just got an email yesterday from Chaparral Wildlife Management Area that theirs is on the 26th. So the day after Christmas, if you need to, burn off some of those calories from dinner and walk around and get some fresh air and all that stuff, the Chaparral is doing theirs as well. So that's another one.
And they actually have on the map, they have 2 map stations. So we had 2 at one time, but it's a lot of work to do that. It's 2 days out of your week completely all day long, because by the time you get back and get everything put up and enter data and things like that, it takes most of the day. So
yeah.
Anyway, if somebody was off over there and wanted to see how it was run during map season, that might be another location.
Yeah. Cool. And the last thing I will mention, and we will have this posted pretty quick, we're finalizing our flyer now, is that, so Angie mentioned that the Welder does a lot of outreach for youth. And that's something that we've been talking about on Cup Chat some, is that this next year will be our first youth birding camp that we're going to hold. So the Rio Diablo birding camp will be held at the end of May, into the beginning of June. And we are partnering with Texas Ornithological Society to do a fundraiser for that because we want it to be as affordable as possible for our youth. So we've already committed to keeping it at the total cost $1,000 for anybody who participates, but we are also, we want to make that as low as possible. We want that the more donations that come in, we can reduce that cost for our participants even more. And so on December 15th in the evening, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, we have some research, brand new research that's going to be shared through that virtual seminar. And so again, we will be posting that pretty quick here this week. But just speaking of birds and research that's being done, if you find all of this interesting, and kind of want to hear, today we talked about how the research is done, but if you want to hear from some people who are doing research and have some really fun data to share, that'll be a good way to learn about it and also help out one of our youth programs at the same time. So that was a little bit of plug for the Birding with Extension side of things today, but I wanted to go ahead and share that real quick. So
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think it'll be fun. It's always fun. I think for those of us that work in academia or at, like in Selma, you're always involved in the research that's going on at the refuge. You get to hear these like fun things and what people have in progress. But not everybody normally gets to be exposed to that, unless there's something that gets highlighted on an Audubon website. You don't always hear about those data, but there's some really cool stuff happening out there. And so that's what we kind of hope to bring to people. So, so thank you both so much again for joining us this morning. Next week, I think I'm talking about research. I better confirm that with Emily and make sure that I'm ready to go. But thank you both for being on this morning and sharing with us about mist netting. Hope y'all have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
We appreciate it. Bye.